yaatu ya si juróom-ñaari waxtu yee genn wàll si ngoon ba si juróom-ñetti waxtu yi jamono ji programme bu xew te ànd ak jamono.
Good evening, viewers, and welcome again to Discovering Truth. And I am Pastor Forbes from Abiding Word Ministries. Tonight will be the second part on the discussion we started last week concerning what I entitled Some Leadership Challenges. Every one of us is a leader in our own right, because leadership has some amount of self-determination, some amount of direction about your life, about your future, about your goals, about your objectives. And the first basic principle of leadership is to be able to be self-lead, for you to lead yourself, for me to lead myself, my thoughts, the discipline of my mind, my appetites, my desires, and all that. And then by the grace of God, as we evolve in leadership, either by consensus or by God's favor or by nomination in the different forms of societal schemes that we have, then people emerge into leadership. We do not necessarily emerge into leadership because we are the best amongst the pack. Sometimes it's just what is required, and that is why, if you remember last week, we said leadership is more of a function. Leadership is not positional as it is functional. It's operational, because once you see leadership as positional or titular, then different things come to play in our lives, which tend to alienate us from people. Somebody once said that people are normal until you give them a title. The person was working very hard, just working hard, and loved his job, loved her job, was putting in the hours, and once they were promoted and given a title, deputy or managing or director, suddenly their attitude and everything changed, quite apart from the expected decorum of the dignity of leadership, because of inspiration and direction and the fact that people ought to look up to you to glean some kind of strength and mentorship. It's just the one that takes you beyond when, like we say, it's gotten into you, or like in my language they will say igona aid, and it's like you just become totally different from what you could otherwise have been. So the leadership we are exploring is more of a function than a title. And last week we looked at a quality of leadership which was juxtaposed to another type. We looked at two scriptures, if you remember. The first one was in the Old Testament of the Bible, the first book of Kings. And I remember telling you that in the 39 books of the Old Testament of the Bible, there are books that are like first and second, at least 2 or 3 sets. One is first and second Samuel, then first and second Kings, then first and second Chronicles. And they talk about different eras of the kings and the chronicling of the events of God's dealing with the people of Israel as the kingdom split to north and south, and different kings, good and bad, emerged. And then of course Samuel talks about the life of Prophet Samuel and Saul and King David, Dauda, and all that. So it's in 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 4, and the study we were looking at was when this young boy, young Solomon, the son of King David, one of the many sons, was the one that ascended to the throne. He succeeded the father. He was succession planning according to God's mind. And most of us who play any form of leadership role, especially not in a leadership role of your own where you founded something, you are the business owner, you are the CEO, you are the proprietors, you are the MD, you are the COO, whatever name you go by, you are the visionary, you are the leader. But when it's a handed over position, for example, you are now the managing director of an insurance company, a telephone company, a bank, an institution, but you did not found it yourself, chances are sometimes that the people around you tend to judge you, compare you with your predecessor, and obviously compare your predecessor with you when your breadth and your tenure has allowed who you are to emerge for good or for bad. But chances are when you step into shoes of people who were there before your predecessors, especially when they were good, That's when the trouble comes. And so Solomon became king in the stead of his father David. David was a young boy that God loved so much, had his faults here and there, but you couldn't fault him for loving God, worshiping God, and putting everything he had to God. And so he became so great. In the Bible, he's known as the sweet psalmist. He sang songs. He wrote music. He was a great king. He was a fighter. He restored things in the kingdom of Israel after King Saul had made a problem of the things of the kingdom of God. But David was so fired up for God that he had intended to leave a legacy by building a huge temple for God. And God told him, no, you are not the one to do it, but I have chosen one of your sons. I have chosen for me the person who would do it. His name is King Solomon. David was so fired up that he was setting aside not just what was kingdom royal property, but his own personal wherewithal and resources. Because you see, if you're in leadership and you talk and you don't put your personal resources, why would anybody follow you when your personal input is not there? Any leader that does not have their own personal input in what they say they believe is a project is just a talking leader and not a doing leader. So, you can be the head of a school, you can be the head of a company, you can be everything, but if there is no passion, there is no involvement, the people cannot see the zeal that you have for this thing, then chances are you'll be leading nobody but yourself and a few die-hard fanatics that will follow you. But if they see your fire, your zeal, your input, your involvement, your passion, then people come on board because of the drive. And so God gave this Solomon the throne of his father David. And Solomon must have said in our own contemporary language, he must have said, wow, these shoes are too big for me. This is King David's shoes. It's almost like what happened in the Southern African country, South Africa, when the all great Mandela served for one term, as he said, and left. And then Thabo Mbeki came in. There was a whole lot of comparison, and really for you to be compared with Nelson Mandela, it puts a lot of pressure on you. And Thabo Mbeki tried to be himself, but the shadow and the aura of Mandela, this global icon, and as I said last week, in my opinion, the greatest human being living on the earth today, well respected across all quarters, all boards, Nelson Mandela. So if you are told to fill his shoes, you can't go in with an attitude. You can't go in and say, he was he and me, I'm going to do it. Because in the Bible there was a king that did that. His name is Rehoboam. Interestingly, he was the son of King Solomon. And when the elders came to talk to him about how they really had a hard time with their fathers, so with their